the 5 stages of reading this book. Denial. Seriously, this isn't a real book, right? I mean, 1960s, they were starting to be better. They really wouldn't write a book like this. And they wouldn't say that stuff, would they? Really? Anger. Holy fudge sticks, they did say that stuff and they did write the book. I can't believe someone would actually sit down and write this stuff. It's totally crap. Bargaining. I don't believe in you, God, but if you could come and make this book not exist, I would be willing to believe in you. Just please do this one thing. Please. It's still there. Depression. Human beings are just total shitbags. We sit around and hate each other. We write books like this. I mean, what's even the point of continuing? Humans are terrible. And acceptance. I guess when you look at history, people write stuff that they hate and then they realize that they were wrong and apologize for it. What? They never apologized for it? We're jumping back to anger. Get back to you after this break.
So gender is just a social construct, and believing in God is a crutch. When you mix them together and give them a whirl, what do you got? Atheist T-Girl!
Hello everyone, it's Atheist T-Girl, also known as Alanis. Today we are going to cover a very wonderful, special, lovely book. A book that I don't have words for. But first, before that, it's time for... Today's God-inspired word comes from Taylor Marsh. Sorry, Dr. Taylor Marsh. Who is that? He was a one-time Episcopal priest in Fort Worth, Texas, but then he joined the Catholic Church, and now he has his own website, books, shows up on TV shows, radio shows, talking head for the Catholics. If there's any background noise, I apologize. There's parts of a hurricane coming through. Dr. Taylor Marsh decided to write a story what it would look like if America were a fully Catholic country. And here's what it might look like. Buckle up, people, and cover your ass. Americans, conditioned by our history, are very concerned about our rights. So before looking at what Catholic America might look like, let's establish that all human rights are given to us by the Creator. As our Declaration of Independence rightly explains, they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Human rights, then, are not arbitrary, but conform to what God has given and allowed. The right to life is one such right. Freedom of speech is a right, but it is limited so it excludes blasphemy of God. God does not give us a right to acts which are contrary to His nature. He gives us a free will, and we can sin with it, but He does not give us the protected right. Nobody on Judgment Day will protest, but I had the right to curse you and commit mortal sins. So then, God does not give us the right to curse Him, the right to kill innocents, nor the right to commit sodomy. These rights are given by the Creator, always conformed to the law of the Creator. With all this in mind, what if America were a fully Catholic country? Oh, can't you feel that? Here's what it might look like. The newly elected president would recite his oath of office, not only with his hand on the Holy Bible, but kneeling before the Blessed Sacrament in a monstrance held by Cardinal Archbishop of Washington, D.C., within the shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. In other words, the president would make his oath directly to Christ. January 21st, the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, would be a perennial day of national penance. Holy matrimony would be honored and recognized as a most fundamental unit of American culture. Large families would be encouraged and assisted through the U.S. tax code. The White House would no longer have a basketball court or bowling alley, but a glorious and beautiful chapel where the holy sacrifice of Mass would be celebrated daily by a presidential Catholic chaplain. Abortion, contraception, sodomy, euthanasia, and divorce would be illegal, as these sins are contrary to the natural law. Of course, abused wives would be protected and assisted by the law. Public blasphemy and abuse of the most holy name of Jesus would be forbidden in film, television, and music. Think about it. Why is it not okay to say the F word on TV, but actors are allowed to mock and blaspheme Jesus? Which is worse, abusing God's name in vain or the F word? The United States would have the greatest foster care system in the world. The Catholic Church, not the state, would organize and perform the 7 corporal acts of mercy: feeding the poor, clothing the naked, caring for the sick, etc. U.S. courtrooms would have both the 10 Commandments and a crucifix of Christ on a wall to proclaim that the justice of God and the divine mercy of God. All holy days of obligation would become federal holidays, and days of obligations would not be transferred to Sunday, since they would become holidays for all. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, the natural law prescribes that parents, not the state, are primarily responsible for the education of children. St. Paul says, "And you, fathers, educate your children in the discipline and correction of the Lord." It is the job of fathers, not the state, to educate. The truth of St. Paul would be recognized by law and encouraged through homeschooling, educational co-ops, parochial schools, and locally governed public schools on the patterns of subsidiarity. Mary, under her title Immaculate Conception, is currently the patroness of the United States. She would become featured on our national seal and on our currency. Streets, landmarks, parks, national monuments, and our currency would be marked by the names and images of great American saints: St. Elizabeth Ann Sexton, St. Catherine Drexel, St. John Newman, St. Francis S. Cabrini, St. Rose Philippine Dachis, and St. Damien of Molokai. American policy would conform to Catholic teachings regarding just war and prohibiting global policing and so-called preventative wars. A cross would be placed on the top of the Washington Monument. The solemnity of the Immaculate Conception would be a day in which the American bishops and all the faithful annually consecrated the nation to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Under the patronage of the Immaculate Conception, the United States would become known for its Marian devotion in a way that would rival medieval France and England. The principle of subsidiarity would apply to our economic and political arrangement, which would include things like the encouragement of local natural food, local water, local government, etc. The sin of usury in form of credit cards, school loans, and other disadvantaging lending policies will be criminalized as contrary to natural law. Our immigration policy would be firm, merciful, and just by including a clear and regularized process for citizenship. Pornography and even unwholesome advertisements and billboards would be outlawed. America would be known as a place where the dignity of woman, especially motherhood, is celebrated. The bishops, nationally or locally, could ask civil leaders to appoint certain days as days of national thanksgiving or as days of penance or mourning. The clergy, but especially our archbishops and bishops, would not live like royalty in mansions as in previous years, but would live penitent and poor, like great bishops of old, such as Saint Martin of Tours, Saint Francis de Sales, Saint Augustine, and Saint Bonaventure. The meetings of the Senate and Congress will begin with the holy sacrifice of the Mass and with prayers and benediction from the clergy. Red masses invoking the aid of the Holy Spirit would be celebrated regularly to beg prudence for judges, attorneys, law school professors, students, and government officials. Those of different religions would be tolerated and no means forced to convert to Catholicism. Conversion, as the popes have taught, is an act of the will, and people should not be forced through political coercion. This is what I'm praying for, and this is what I'm working for, not by force, but by patience, penance, and kindness. There is a lot more of this I'm not going to read, but yeah. Okay, and that is our Fundy of the Week. I gotta say, I have skipped over Catholics way too long to look for this kind of stuff. I was raised thinking they were boring. But yeah, they have the freaky stuff too. I apologize ahead of time. I generally don't like using the word Negro because often I have seen it being used as racist and as a way for people to get as close to that other N-word without actually saying it. Unfortunately, in covering this book, I'm going to have to use it a lot, and I really ask that I apologize for it because I don't like using it. But again, I apologize because some of the stuff you're about to hear is as racist as shit. And I didn't like reading it, and if you might be triggered by it, please turn it off. Go watch puppies, kittens. Go think about the good that's in this world, not about people like this. The Church and the Negro was published by John L. Lund in 1968. There is a word that I've tended to use less and less since I left religion. That would be the word evil. The word, as I was raised using it, had a lot of connotations that it was the result of sin, the devil's influence, and other religious buzzwords. As I don't believe that sin is a thing, and there is no devil, I don't use the word. I am making an exception to this right now. This book and the ideas within it are evil. To get into this book, we need a bit of a history lesson. The Mormon Church, or as they prefer to be called, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, give it up, Mormons. Stop trying to make it happen. It is not going to happen. Had a policy that black people were not allowed to have the priesthood in the church. This was a policy that they realized was wrong, apologized, and stopped all the way back in 1978. That's pretty late. And they didn't apologize for what the hell? Now, I know some of the arguments that may come up on this video, but all religions in the West use racism and often were tools of racism. Yes, they were and sometimes still are. But most have at least publicly apologized for the worst instances of it. Mormonism has never apologized for their acts in this regard. But why are you worried about a religion not letting their believers have X? Because you know that X isn't real. Well, it isn't, but that doesn't change how it felt to those people affected by the policy, and most discrimination builds on each other. The no priesthood was the official policy, but it's very unlikely that racism the black people faced in the Mormon church was limited to just that. It might also be asked, what is the priesthood? What did it mean to those who are in the Mormon religion not to be eligible for the priesthood? Well, for one, I've seen it reported that this meant they could not be saved. That one is untrue. Joseph Smith, and I quote, "They have souls and are subjects of salvation." History of the Church, Volume 217. They were, as far as I've been able to determine, limited into what afterlife/heaven they could get into, and were not eligible to be one of those who will become their own God and repeat the whole process our God went through. I'm referring to their theology, not stating a belief in God or afterlife. When I say our God, I mean their God that they believe is our God. Yeah, but I don't believe in that God. Okay. Second, it meant that they could not be sealed or have endowment. The endowment was a teaching and process done in a temple to prepare Mormons for godhood. Sealing is spiritual marriage. For Mormons, there is a physical marriage, which takes place here on earth, and then the sealed marriages, which will continue after death. Black people were told that those they loved here and married on earth were not going to be their spouses in the afterlife. And again, I must point out that yes, I believe this is all fake. No God, no afterlife, no post-death spirit sex. But those who are in the church do believe this, and whether it does happen or not after death, it still was hurtful to endure in this life. This book, The Church and the Negro, is not an official document from the church. The author, in fact, states this in his opening. Quote, "It is not the author's privilege, prerogative, or intention to speak for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This work must be regarded as the author's interpretation of research materials found while examining the Mormon position concerning the Negro. Full responsibility is therefore assumed by the author for the contents of this book." End quote. However, in the next chapter, the author continues, quote, "Much thought and consideration were given to the propriety of producing the following writing. It was for this reason the church leaders in high positions were consulted. Although no official endorsement was sought, the author was encouraged to exercise his rights as an individual to publish this book. I can find no official condemnation of this book. I cannot find an official approval of this book, but as mentioned by the author, he was encouraged to publish this book. I know it was used often by members of the church, and as far as I can tell, nothing in it has been refuted by the church. So for me, while it may not be church doctrine, it is a very close explanation of the church doctrine, and that while it may vary in small details, it is overall what was taught and practiced up until 1978, and which was never stated to be wrong. The closest I have been able to find was a critique, not of the book, but of one of the arguments about the Mark of Cain, and this was from the same person who wrote this. But my commitment to the religion is much too broadly based for me to become disaffected over what is, after all, a peripheral problem by comparison with the more fundamental tenets of the faith. The peripheral problem was allowing blacks to be equal in a church, and of course this writer, Armand L. Moss, was a white man who thought that the issue of equality was small. So he may have disagreed with one of the arguments. He still was a racist jerk as well. So far, I have talked about why I think this book should be covered. It contains doctrine that was never apologized, it affected people, and that it is a fairly recognized coverage of the doctrine. But other than evil, I have yet to talk about what is in this book. Put simply, this book is a white supremacist wet dream of how to other a group of people, explain why it's okay to treat them less than equal, justify how they are really not racist in doing so, all while blaming that group of people for what restrictions they have. Let me quote some on the first page. The civil rights movement is emerging as a dragon slayer of certain social evils. The dragons of prejudice and discrimination are being attacked, and rightly so, by many of those who believe in the dignity of the human soul. Equality, justice, and individual rights are being demanded for all. Well, so far that's great. Go equity! Hooray! Fight those evil dragons! Oh, wait, the page keeps going on. As in the case of most struggles, a few innocent casualties are to be expected and summarily excused. But there is no excuse for attacking the innocent in the name of might or right. The Mormon Church has been attacked as one that discriminates against the Negroes in the community. Nothing could be further from the truth. End quote. Basically, kill those dragons. I hate dragons, and they should never be allowed to live. Oh, you want to know what I have right here? Oh, yeah, it's an oversized lizard. Well, yes, he is breathing fire. No, of course not. He's not a dragon. I hate dragons, and I'm no way a supporter of dragons, but I love my fire-breathing oversized lizard. Why are you stabbing him? Well, I used to support knights until they went after the innocent. The second chapter of this book is about discrimination and how this great nation was founded as all men being equal, and how even before the states recognized them as equal, Mormons recognized blacks as equal and that they are against discrimination. Quote, Mormons are firm in their belief that the Negro is entitled to every right, guaranteed by our Constitution. President Joseph Fielding Smith. It argues that there are racists in the church, as are in any group, but that they should not be judged on the individual members and their beliefs. Instead, and I quote, does the Mormon Church discriminate against the Negro? The answer is no. The official position is that the Negroes are sons and daughters of God and may through righteous works and faith return to His presence. Individual church members who are unrighteously discriminate against the Negro should be warned that they are not in harmony with the gospel of Jesus Christ. A basic overview of the ideas put forth in this book are: 1. Cain disobeyed God, and because of that and the murdering of Abel, he was marked by God. This marking was black skin. Because Cain rebelled, he was stripped of the right of priesthood. Cain's descendants carry the same mark and have some of the same restrictions. That Ham, Noah's son, ensured the survival of the line of Cain by marrying one of Cain's great-grandchildren, a black woman. They use a less than nice word here, but I'm not going to repeat it to describe her. 5. That Joseph Smith and other prophets have declared that the descendants of Cain, no matter what the color they are now, or how much of a percentage of black they have in them, cannot hold the priesthood. Quote, no person having the least particle of Negro blood can hold the priesthood, Joseph Smith. Other than that, black people are completely treated fairly and have all rights. That black people aren't punished for being black or being the children of Cain. They are punished because they sinned before being born and thus got assigned to this, and they deserve this limitation until God says otherwise. Wow, there's so much in this book that I could talk hours on it. But let's go over some of these highlights. There is a repeated insistence through the book that there is no racism put towards black people, and they are treated much more fairly by the Mormon Church than by any other church. Quote, the Mormon Church can offer the Negro more than any other religious organization. A Negro may be baptized and confirmed a member of the Church of Jesus, yada, 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 yada. He may be called to serve as a teacher. He may be called to be an administrator. He may receive the patriarchal blessing, enter the temple to be baptized for the dead, serve as a missionary, and sustain officers of the church. He should pay 1/10 of all he earns to the church, fast, etc. The church leaders from the earliest times up to including the present have never changed their position concerning the Negro, simply stating no one who is a sin of Cain may function in any capacity requiring priesthood. End quotes. They believe Mormonism is the best for black people because, quote again, What other church can baptize them by divine authority and confirm and give them the gift of the Holy Ghost? What other can promise them with assurances that they can, if they are faithful and true before the Lord, enter into the celestial kingdom? Not one of them. For other churches do not know anything about the celestial kingdom. This argument relies on the belief that you can treat a group of people separately than yourself, but equal. Something Jim Crow taught us doesn't work. In addition, their assurances that black people are best served by the church do not come from the idea that black people are treated better by the Mormon church than other churches. Instead, the assurances come from the belief that because the Mormon church is the one true right church, black people are assured they are going to heaven. So even if other churches treat black people better, these blacks are going to hell and are worse served by their churches. This book contains literally dozens, if not hundreds, of cringe-inducing justifications and arguments about why the Mormons can treat black people as almost the same and it not be racism. But I want to focus on two sections at the end of the book. 1. They have comments by and about Mormon Negroes, which, as the book says, quote, this section pertains to the Negro converts to the church and how they view their membership. Comments by prominent church leaders about Negro members are also included. And section 2, church leaders speak out on the Negro question. The first section talks about prominent black people who were in the early part of the Mormon church and also some quotes from them. Of them, the saddest I find is the one testimony they use in support, but to me screams of internalized racism. Edgar Whittingham, a student at BYU, he is born in Panama, and because of the cost and close availability of a Mormon college, he ended up attending church and converting to being a Mormon. It wasn't until well after becoming a Mormon that he was told that black people cannot go all the way and become one of the priesthood. Quote, naturally, I was deeply hurt and greatly upset about it. I guess my emotions got the best of me. I didn't do anything irrational, but having been deeply wounded in the house of my friends, I left the church and stayed away for approximately 1 year. This is a major emphasis I want to make. I think a person should be judged on his merits and his personality rather than as a member of a race. Whatever I say today, for instance, is in no way reflects the opinion of other Negroes, even Negroes who are members of the church. Up until the time I was told that because I was a Negro, I could not hold the priesthood, my knowledge of Christianity in the Methodist Church had persuaded me to believe that regardless of color, we would all have the opportunity to do the same things or acquire the same glories. My reaction to being told I could not hold the priesthood was that it was a stigma of discrimination. Now, this is the general belief that I think most Negroes hold today. Perhaps the only reason I am a member of the church today is that I heard the gospel before I had known of this particular curse. I don't know whether I could have been objective enough or open-minded enough to have gone through my study of the teaching of the church if I had known the church position considering Negroes and priesthood. Even as a member of the church, I still find the curse very difficult to understand. It is argued that we may have done something in the pre-existence and that may have hurt our personal growth. End quote. Another story I found quite sad is the story of Elijah Abel. He was the first black person to be given the priesthood. He faithfully served his church, and in the end, he was literally worked to death by the same church. Quote, in 1883, as a member of the Third Quorum of 70, he left Salt Lake City on a mission to Canada, during which he also performed missionary labors in the United States. 2 weeks after his return, he died, December 25, 1884, of debility, consequent upon exposure while laboring in the ministry in Ohio. He died in full faith of the gospel. End quote. Debility is not explained, but in the context, we can assume it was the result of him catching something either in his mission trip or when he was working at home. It is described in the Merriam-Webster dictionary as weakness, infirmity. The man was 76 years old and died serving his church. but he didn't die a priest. Despite being confirmed as a priest, he had this stripped from him in 1879, and despite several letters to ministers, Joseph Smith, and other leaders, he never was given it back. Both of these men loved their church, but their reward was to be treated as a second-class Mormon because of their skin. This isn't unusual for churches of the time, but what is unusual is the modern-day church's refusal to give any kind of apology for it. One of these men spent what seems like a good amount of time in his life wondering why he was not worthy of the religion, and having it repeatedly thrown in his face that it was the result of something he did in some made-up time before birth. The other gave his life to the mission. Both are used here as examples of good Negroes, but neither were treated fairly by the church. The second section is quotes from leaders of the church. I'm not going to give much explanation, just let some of the words speak for themselves. Quote, "Had I anything to do with the Negro, I would confine them by strict law to their own species and put them on a national equalization." End quote, Joseph Smith. Quote, "The blacks should be used like servants and not like brutes. It is their privilege to live so as to enjoy many of the blessings which attend obedience to the first principles of the gospel, though they are not entitled to the priesthood." End quote. Brigham Young. Quote, "Furthermore, your ideas, as we understand them, appear to contemplate the intermarriage of the Negro and the white race, a concept which has heretofore been most repugnant to most normal-minded people." End quote. John F. Stewart. Quote, "Why are so many inhabitants of the earth cursed with a skin of blackness?" End quote. Brigham Young. Quote, "When people rebel against God's commandments, either during their pre-earth life or while in mortality, they are given a dark skin so that those who are of the chosen seed will not intermarry with them." End quote. John Lewis Lund, our author. I'm only scratching the surface of what this slightly over 100-page book contains. It talks about the evils of interbreeding/marriage with black people, contains information as to why black people have black skin that is quite scientifically laughable, and makes arguments as to when black people will be able to have the priesthood that had not been fulfilled by the time the 1978 edict to allow them had been made. It is a book full of hate written as a nice, neat, sympathetic, reasonable approach as to why the bigotry of the Mormons is not really racist, and why it is okay. If you're a white supremacist, first of all, why the fuck are you watching my channel? And second, check this book out, as you will learn a lot of how to be racist while blaming other people for it. If you're a good person, you might be better off without this stuff in your head. If you are an ex-Mormon or know of people who are fighting against Mormons, please send me a note in Twitter at atheist_t_girl, and I can give you a link for a copy of this book. But be warned, it left a foul-tasting stench in my spirit. And I firmly believe, as an atheist, I have no spirit. But it was so bad that one was created just to be tainted by this book. If you want to see another opinion of this book, I would check out Ex-Cult Baby. She did a review of it after I gave her a copy, and I've not watched it yet because I did not want it to influence my review. But I enjoy her channel, and I think it's worth checking out her video, which I will do myself after I'm done making this video. I'll put a link to that video in my information bar. Thank y'all for watching and subscribing. It was a tough one to read and write on this one. A lot of gross stuff. And I'm thankful that I have viewers who watch this and who are good people. If you want to find more about me, you can always find me on Twitter at atheist_t_girl. You can also find a link to my PayPal on my information bar. Next week, we're going to try to do something less weighty, less controversial. Let me look up what my next video is going to be. Oh yeah, here it is. We are going to be talking about microaggression, such as racism, ableism, LGBT, and other places where it's used. And we're going to approach it through the issue of rationality, rules, Oh, I am really going to get screwed on my next video, aren't I? Well, I hope y'all have a great day.